Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of Bike Profiles. Now this one here is one of my personal bikes. I've had this since 2015. At the time of you watching this video may vary, but this video was produced in 2023, September of 2023. So I've had this bike about 8 years. It's had many different group sets on it. And from time to time, it either gets stripped down or it just sits for a while. And that's the case for today. So the bike had been sitting, I guess I'd have to check my Strava to see when's the last time I rode it, but it's been probably a year. And it was just sitting, and I thought, you know what, let's revive it. Let's get it back out on the road. Now, what you'll notice on this bike is it doesn't have the latest and greatest. It has just it's a quality build with things that basically have been on it for a while. So for example, and the reason that some of this stuff is on there, let's go through that as well. So at one time I had the R9100 group set on here, the Dur-Ace one, that was a black blacked out crank set, derailleurs, all that stuff. And I eventually moved that group set to another bike, several bikes. And then I had this 9000 group. And so I thought, you know what, even though it's an older group, it actually, in my opinion, aesthetically looks better on this bike. So you have the stainless steel Columbus tubing, and you have a silver finish on the crankset and componentry. So the derailleurs, and also like for example, just this silver accent here on the shifters. So that's why this group set is on there. You can see the brake calipers as well. So that group set R9000, the first iteration of 11-speed, and it's a bulletproof group set. It's really a nice group set. All right, so let's get going. So we have a stainless steel Tommasini. The model is called an X-Fire, and this model was made custom for me. And at the time that I got it back in 2015, this was the only one ever imported into the country. So it had a level top tube, which is what I wanted, and it had these reverse etching, laser etched decals, and there had not been a bike like this imported. What they had done is they had done a sloping top tube version and different type of logos, but 8 years ago, the way that this frame was made, this was the only one of its kind in the US. And let's talk about that briefly. There are only 11 Tommasini dealers in the entire United States, and I'm one of them. So I own 2 Tommassinis. I've done a bike profile on the other one. It's a Techno, so it's like a baby blue Techno with chrome lugs, a different type of frame altogether, steel fork as well, a polished steel fork, chain stays, seat stays. So it's just a completely different bike. So again, this is a Columbus XCR tube set, and this is only made for Tommasini, this particular tube set. And what you'll notice is that every tube on here has a different shape to it. So, this is like a diamond. This has some flat sections on it. The only round sections are the seat tube, because you got to put a derailleur clamp on there, and not even the seat stays and chain stays. They have a little bit of shaping as well. So this frame is only made for, or these tubes are only made for Tommasini and for this particular frame. So Columbus XCR is a very high-end quality steel. It's a stainless steel. It's also a seamless So in other words, it's not a tube that is then, a flat sheet then made round and then welded at the bottom, right? So this is extruded this way, and they call it seamless. So it's a very, very, very exclusive tube set. All right, so let's start from front to back. So we have, as I mentioned, a Dur-Ace 9000 group set, and we have our badge there. So hopefully that'll focus in nicely. So, and then you could also see some stamping right at the bottom headset. Head tube, the bottom of the head tube. There's also some stamping on the bottom bracket. So we'll show that real quick before I forget. And that's upside down, and I apologize, but the way the bike is parked, that's the only way I'm going to be able to shoot it for now. So that says made in Italy. Okay, so the Dur-Ace shifters, I've talked many times before about the way I like to wrap the bar tape. So I like to wrap it from top to bottom. I just think it gives a much cleaner look, and there's not any black electrical tape or any type of finishing tape that then, gets all gooey and you have to wrap it a few more times until you can get to the bike shop. Now this is a Super Logic, so it's a Ritchie handlebar, Super Logic, and I don't ride a lot of carbon things, but I do trust Ritchie stuff. This Ritchie Super Logic handlebar is just a very well made handlebar, and it's just got a nice shape to it here. So when you put your palms on here, it's just got a nice shape to it. It is a compact drop, so there's that, and there's the logos. So it's called the Evo Curve. Now this is one of my favorite handlebars. I've got a few favorites. I've got 9 bikes, so from time to time you choose something else, but I've got about 2 or 3 of these Super Logic Evo Curve handlebars. All right, so front brake, of course, it is rim brake, and most of you know already that I'm a huge fan of head wheels. So here's another set of head wheels on this bike with the Continental 5000 in cream, and they are, I just think that they're really snazzy, right? So they're hard to find through my distributors, so oftentimes I have to buy these through other bike shops. The clearance for this 28 tire is super tight in the fork. The brake caliper is fine, but in the fork it's pretty tight. It's going to be hard for me to shoot that. Let me see if I can get it from the back side. Anyway, it's really tight, so if this wheel goes out of true, I'll have to true it pretty quickly. Okay, so let's talk about the geometry real quick. Because I mentioned it's custom, this top tube is a 55.5 top tube and a 110 stem. So you could probably read that there, 110. And that fits me really, really well. It's funny that people that watch YouTube always want to give fitting advice. It just cracks me up. So I was riding, I forget which one of my bikes, and someone said, oh, some bike fitters would think that bike's too big for you. It's many times it's camera angle, it's seating position. I may not be riding hard, I may not be in a tuck, I may not be in the drops. So you can't tell someone that their bike fit is off. It's just hilarious. I am a fitter, and I've been a fitter for over 20 years. So yeah, it's really funny. So yeah, 55.5 top tube, 110 stem, 150 head tube, and as I mentioned, level top tube. All right, let's keep working our way back. Oh, and a 73.5 seat tube, because that's the seat tube that I like. So a lot of bikes, they have these steeper seat tube angles of 74. I'm not a fan of those. And then if you folks remember the Le Mans years, they were like 72.5 seat tubes. So yeah, 73.5 is pretty much what I like. So a 5339 Dur-Ace crankset, and we have a Dur-Ace front derailleur, and this is nice, right? So it's a clamp-on front derailleur, so it has a dedicated branded clamp on. And I've done a video about this on front derailleurs. Personally, I like to buy the clamp separately from the derailleur. So, you know, let's say you needed to put a derailleur on this. A front derailleur on this. You can buy these front derailleurs as one assembly with the band clamp. But I don't like to buy them that way, because then I'm limited, and that band clamp front derailleur can only go on this bike or whatever band clamp size I got. So, and the reason I don't like that is because if you want to move your front derailleur to another bike, unless it's a round seat tube, you're not going to be able to, right? So I just buy the clamp and the derailleur separate, move the derailleur to any bike that I want, especially if I want to put it on, let's say, a carbon frame, which generally does not have round seat posts. So that will limit you long term. So just think about that. This front derailleur, I guess, got scraped up when I think the clamp slid down, and so shifting into the big ring was rubbing just a little bit, so that caused the problem there. Okay, I've got a lizard skin chainstay protector. Now, I've noticed that with a lot of these chainstay protectors, the adhesive just doesn't work. This lizard skin was very, very good. It's been on there for 8 years, and I mean, there's just not a blemish on it. There's no bubbles or anything. But I guess the trick is you use a hair dryer to heat it up a little bit and then stretch it onto obviously you clean it very well. You clean the chainstay, alcohol prep it, and then go with the hair dryer and the chainstay protector. 1128 Dur-Ace cassette, a short cage. This is the way the 9000 derailleurs used to be, and if you wanted a longer cage, then you had to go to Ultegra. Now the R9100 is a fairly long cage, even though they just call it a regular short cage rear derailleur. So you'll have some more options for cassette options with that longer cage derailleur. I've also mentioned many times before that when you mount these derailleurs onto steel bikes, I've noticed that even though this is a short cage derailleur, and let me show that to you again, even though that this is a short cage derailleur, I've been able to mount 32 and 34 cassettes back here without having to use a road link or any fancy anything to be able to mount a larger cassette back here. And I get the gear range from just a standard rear derailleur. I don't know why. On carbon frames, you seem to be limited. Head wheel in the back as well. This is an LT version, which they don't make anymore. I think they call it something else. They used to have like a Stallion build and LT, and they've kind of reduced the names of their wheels. And then on the back again, a R9000. Now there's plenty of space in the back for this 28 tire on a 25 external rim. So no issues in the back. It's just the front. This is, 2015, so they weren't really thinking about 32 tires on bikes. They do make this bike now in a disc brake version, so you can probably get, 32 plus tires in there. And then lastly, we have the Superlogic seat post, and we have the Honey Brooks saddle. Now, let's talk about this saddle for a little bit. I've had a black and Honey Brooks saddle for, probably 50, I don't know, whenever they came out. These are called Swallows, I believe. I think these came out, I don't know, at least 15 years ago, possibly longer. 2008, yeah, maybe long. Oh, actually, I had a black one in 2007 when I rode my fixed gear at the Furnace Creek 508. So it was out before 2007. So anyway, I've had that black one since 2007, 2006 time frame, and then I got this one 2007. So I've had these saddles, 17, 18 years. And from time to time, I want to try latest and greatest, and I ride different stuff. And for a lot of my bikes and a lot of my videos, I do talk about SQ Lab saddles. And they're fantastic saddles. But, they're great for, in my situation, they're great for 200 milers, 300 milers. I did a 600K on it, no problem. But I just got back from Paris-Brest-Paris, and that was a 762 mile, 40,000 foot effort, or 1,226 kilometers and 12,000 meters of climbing. So I was pedaling the bike 51 hours, and I said, God, I wonder if my leather Brooks saddles would have been better for me than the SQ Lab saddle over that many hours. So I dug this one out of my storage stuff, and that's why it's on here. And some of you might say, oh, but the nose is up, oh, this or that. Well, the thing about Brooks saddles is almost always the nose is going to be up a little bit, because you kind of sit in this pocket here. And that's what makes these saddles so comfortable. You see this amount of give? So this same amount of give is on my fixed gear. I have one of these in black. And when you're spinning at 130 cadence and you're bouncing up and down on the saddle, no matter how smooth you try to pedal, you will bounce. And if you have a rigid saddle underneath you, that can become painful. Now, another thing about setting this saddle up. So first thing is nose up attitude, like on a plane. But the other thing is these saddle rails look so long, and it looks like, wow, you've got that saddle so far forward. But it's actually an optical illusion. And let me explain. This part here, from here to here, is really narrow. Then it starts to, like right here, it starts to bend out. So in other words, you can only clamp this saddle right about here, because this bows out and then this is another turn. So you can only clamp the saddle from here to about here, right? So your window of adjustment is really, really small, like right there. That's it. So right now the saddle is basically centered in the rails, even though it looks like it's so far forward. See that optical illusion? Okay. Anyway, these saddles are adjustable. So if you look down inside here, there's a bolt. And if I can shoot underneath there, there is a threaded bolt. I'm trying to get under there. Anyway, there's a threaded bolt back there. This here, you can increase and decrease the tension of your saddle. So, all the really experienced randonneurs were actually back on you know, not back, but they were on Brook saddles, and they were on Gillies Bertude saddles as well. So I'm going to give this thing a whirl, because it's been several years since I've ridden my leather saddle. And on my fixed gear, hang on a second while I grab that. So that's the black one on my fixed gear. So I rode that on Sunday, and I was like, wow, this is really comfortable again. So so that made me decide to put this this leather saddle on this bike build. Now, of course, I still have my SQ Lab saddle, so if things don't work out, then I will go back. But I'm thinking about the longer brevets, the 600Ks and above. My saddle has to be more comfortable than the SQ Lab was. It just was too tight. Too stiff. So anyway, so that's the Tommasini X-Fire Columbus XCR stainless steel tubing. This thing, when I got this frame, this was a $5,000 frame. Now, you know, you constantly have the dollar and euro volatility, so I haven't even looked at the pricing of this frame anymore, but I'm sure it's got to be at least $4,500 or so. Yeah, it fluctuates, and so it depends on when you buy your frame. So I don't know that I talked about these pedals, but I've been riding these pedals a long time. These are the Asioma power meter pedals, and the wonderful and beautiful thing about them is their portability and their internal batteries, so you don't have to chase around 2032s or Garmin. They've got their own special battery that you have to get. So in my opinion, this is a much better power meter, and you don't have, and it's internal battery, so you have no issues with water ingress or anything like that. Okay, that is all for today. If you think that this bike is sweet, then put a thumbs up in the comment section, and I know you've stuck around to the end. If you think steel bikes are old school and rim brakes are old school and they don't have a place, and oh my god, that saddle looks gaudy, why do you have that on there? Get yourself a real saddle, blah blah blah. Yeah, make that comment down below too, so I can laugh at you. I love my steel bikes, I love my leather saddles, and long term, those are the things that are going to last. I've got a shop full of broken carbon stuff, carbon frames, carbon wheels, carbon stems, carbon handlebars. I got all kinds of stuff in there. It's like a museum for carbon broken pieces. Okay, that is all for today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you up the road.